It was a typical evening in Hollywood, a glamorous event at a luxurious hotel, full of flashing cameras and fans eagerly waiting to meet their idols. The air was electric, and the crowd buzzed with excitement. But amid the chaos, a moment was about to unfold that would change everything. Keanu Reeves, the beloved actor known for his roles in action films and his humble, down-to-earth nature, stood on stage, greeting fans and signing autographs. The atmosphere was lighthearted, and everyone was enjoying the event. But then, out of nowhere, a young voice pierced through the crowd. It was a little girl, maybe no older than 7 or 8, with wide eyes full of innocence. "Mr. Reeves," she asked, "can you tell me, what is God?" The room went silent. The energy shifted instantly. It was as if time itself had paused. Keanu paused too, his pen hovering in midair as he looked at the girl, taken aback by the weight of her question. Everyone in the room, from the fans to the staff, waited for his answer. The question wasn't something one would expect to hear at a star-studded event, much less from a little child. It was simple, but profound. No one could have predicted that a child, standing so small in such a large, overwhelming room, would be the one to ask a question that seemed almost impossible to answer. Keanu's face remained calm, his expression unreadable. He wasn't used to this. In all his years of being in the public eye, no one had ever asked him something so raw and direct. This wasn't about movie scripts or fame. This was a question that dug deep, tapping into something far more profound. A few moments passed before Keanu finally broke the silence, but he wasn't sure what to say. His usual confident demeanor felt distant in this moment. The weight of the question hung heavy in the air, and for a second, he felt as though the whole world was watching, waiting for him to provide an answer to something that most adults themselves still struggle to understand. The crowd was still waiting. Some murmured softly, others exchanged nervous glances. No one seemed to know what to expect next. But then, as if by instinct, Keanu turned to the little girl, his gaze softening, and asked, "Why do you ask, sweetie?" The girl's eyes were wide, her innocence still intact, as she answered simply, "Because I think God is something we need to know about." There it was, the reason for the question, a pure, innocent search for meaning. It was a moment that, no matter how hard one tried to predict it, could never be prepared for. Keanu felt a mix of awe and confusion, but most of all, a sense of responsibility. How could he, of all people, answer such a question? What could he say to a little girl who was already questioning something so big, so complex? Keanu paused for a moment longer. He was unsure of what words could possibly live up to the magnitude of her inquiry. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Keanu suddenly said, breaking the tension in the room, as though to remind everyone that this was, after all, a live event. He took a breath, then looked down at the little girl and added, "I think we all have our own ways of looking at God, and that's okay. What's important is that we keep asking these questions." He smiled at her, reassuring smile that spoke volumes more than any scripted line or carefully thought-out answer could. His words seemed to hang in the air as the crowd, momentarily, seemed to forget the celebrity atmosphere surrounding them. Everyone had been expecting Keanu to say something witty or profound, something that would fit neatly into the world they knew, something that would align with the expectations of a Hollywood star. But this was different. Keanu's response didn't offer the simplicity that they might have wanted. It wasn't the answer they expected. Instead, it was a reminder that some questions in life were bigger than answers. Some questions couldn't be easily wrapped up in neat little packages. They needed time. They needed patience. And most of all, they needed love. The little girl smiled softly, sensing the sincerity in his words. As the crowd continued to watch, Keanu felt an overwhelming surge of emotion. This moment, this unexpected question, had touched something deep inside him, a reminder of how simple, yet powerful, a child's curiosity could be. For a brief moment, he wondered if he himself could answer that question. Could he, in his own life, find the answer to what God was? Could anyone? But instead of worrying about providing the right response, Keanu made a decision in that moment. He wasn't going to rush to answer. Instead, he would embrace the question. And so, the evening continued, But the air was different now. The question of what is God had set the stage for a journey that Keanu wasn't sure where it would lead, but one he knew would stay with him for a long time. The crowd, too, began to realize that something had shifted in the room. It wasn't just the celebrity presence. It wasn't just about the glitz and glam of Hollywood. It was about something deeper, a question that transcended all the fame and fortune in the world. The little girl had opened a door, and Keanu Reeves, the man who had everything, would soon discover that sometimes the most profound answers come when you least expect them. Keanu Reeves wasn't always the humble, enigmatic figure the world knows today. His journey to stardom had been long, fraught with challenges, and filled with moments that tested his very belief in humanity. Behind his on-screen charisma and calm demeanor lies a man who has faced the weight of loss, disappointment, and the struggles of being in the public eye. But perhaps it's these very hardships that have shaped him into the man who stood before that little girl, unsure of how to answer her profound question. Born in Beirut, Lebanon, to an English mother and an American father, Keanu's early life was marked by constant movement and a lack of stability. His parents separated when he was young, and Keanu, along with his mother and sister, moved to Toronto. Growing up, Keanu was no stranger to financial struggles, and his family's situation was far from glamorous. They didn't have much, but they had each other. It was during these formative years that Keanu's passion for acting began to surface. A natural performer, he found solace in the theater and on stage, where he could escape from the complexities of his home life. But despite his early love for acting, the journey wasn't always easy. Keanu often struggled with self-doubt, and the odds seemed stacked against him. In his 20s, Keanu moved to Los Angeles in pursuit of his dreams. But while his career was starting to take off, thanks to roles in films like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and Point Break, his personal life was crumbling. His beloved sister, Kim, was diagnosed with leukemia. It was a devastating blow to Keanu, who had always been close to his family. In the years that followed, he did everything he could to support Kim, even stepping back from his career at times to be by her side. Tragically, Kim's battle with cancer ended in her passing. The loss of his sister, compounded by the ending of a relationship with Jennifer Syme, his girlfriend at the time, who also tragically died in a car accident in 2001, left Keanu reeling. The pain of losing both the woman he loved and his sister pushed him into a period of deep reflection. His life, once filled with Hollywood glamour, now felt like an endless cycle of grief and solitude. Despite these personal tragedies, Keanu's resilience became one of his defining traits. He refused to let fame define him, rejecting the typical trappings of celebrity life. While other actors spent their time in the spotlight, Keanu found peace in solitude. He gave much of his wealth away to cancer research and was often seen offering support to those in need, quietly helping people without seeking recognition. But this quiet humility, this deep well of introspection, didn't make Keanu any less human. He still faced his demons, his doubts, and the ever-present question of whether there was more to life than fame, fortune, and loss. Was there a deeper meaning? Was there an answer to the questions that plagued his soul? Keanu's journey had been defined by a search for something more, something beyond the material world. But it wasn't until that moment with the little girl at the event that he truly understood the weight of her question. For Keanu, the question of God had always lingered in the background, an elusive thought that would sometimes surface, but one he could never fully answer. His experience with loss, his search for meaning, and his efforts to live a life grounded in kindness had led him to believe that maybe, just maybe, the answer to the big questions in life wasn't something you could simply grasp with your mind. It wasn't a definitive answer, written down in a book, or spoken aloud in a grand revelation. It was something that had to be felt, and perhaps, just perhaps, that was why the question from the little girl felt so significant. In a world where answers were often demanded, Keanu was beginning to realize that sometimes, the most powerful thing you could do was allow yourself to be present with the question, and to accept that not knowing was okay. As Keanu walked through his memories, he couldn't help but reflect on the moments that had shaped him. He had seen firsthand the fragility of life, the fleeting nature of time, and the overwhelming presence of love and loss. But he had also seen the beauty in human connection, the kindness of strangers, the bonds that formed in the most unexpected places. Those moments, those simple gestures, had shaped his understanding of what it meant to truly live. The little girl's question had unearthed a part of Keanu that he hadn't realized needed healing. Perhaps, in his quiet moments of grief, he had been asking the same question all along. But unlike the little girl, who asked with untainted curiosity, Keanu had been asking through pain, through his search for answers that didn't exist in the world around him. But now, in this moment, the question had taken on new significance. It wasn't just about finding the right answer. It was about finding peace with the question itself. As he stood backstage, thinking about the encounter, Keanu found himself filled with a sense of calm. It was as if that brief exchange with the little girl had opened a door inside him, one that he hadn't even realized had been closed. For the first time in a long time, Keanu felt like he didn't need to have all the answers. He just needed to keep searching, keep asking, and trust that the answers would come when the time was right. The room, once filled with anticipation and tension, now felt different. Keanu had felt the shift, the moment when the question of God had transformed into something much bigger than any of them had expected. For Keanu, the question wasn't just a question anymore. It was a calling, a reminder that, despite everything he had been through, the search for meaning, for understanding, was a journey worth taking. And so, as the event continued, Keanu walked back into the limelight with a new sense of purpose. That little girl, with her innocent inquiry, had unknowingly set him on a path that would lead to profound personal growth, and perhaps, one day, an answer to a question that had lingered in his heart for years. The days following that fateful encounter with the little girl seemed to blur together for Keanu. On the surface, life continued as usual. He kept up with his career, attending events, signing autographs, and working on various projects. But beneath the glitz and glamour, the question the little girl had asked him continued to echo in his mind. What is God? It wasn't just a fleeting thought. It was as if the universe had presented him with a challenge, one that had caught him off guard. Keanu was no stranger to introspection, but this was different. It wasn't about dealing with personal loss or trying to make sense of the unpredictable nature of life. It was a question that reached into his very soul, pulling him into a deeper level of questioning. Despite his fame and success, Keanu had always been a man who kept a lot to himself. He had learned early on that being in the public could be isolating, and as a result, he kept his circle small. But even the people closest to him couldn't have known the depth of his inner turmoil. It wasn't that Keanu didn't have faith, he just didn't know what that faith looked like. Growing up, he had been exposed to various beliefs. His mother, a quiet, thoughtful woman, had always instilled in him the importance of compassion and kindness, regardless of religious background. His family had attended church on occasion, but faith had never been something that was pushed on him. It was more of a quiet understanding, something unspoken but ever-present. But now, as Keanu sat alone in his Los Angeles home one night, gazing out at the city lights, he felt the weight of the question pressing down on him. What is God? It wasn't a question that could be answered with a simple yes or no. It wasn't something you could wrap up in a neat little package. He wasn't sure where to start, and for the first time in a long while, Keanu realized that there was something he didn't know. His mind wandered back to the little girl. Her pure, innocent curiosity had been both heartwarming and unsettling. The simplicity of her question had made him confront something he had avoided for years, the idea that maybe the answers to life's big questions weren't as clear-cut as he had once believed. Keanu wasn't sure if he was ready to face this. In the past, whenever something difficult had come into his life, he had always turned inward. He had always relied on his own ability to process things quietly, away from the noise of the world. But now, for the first time, he felt like he needed help, like he couldn't navigate this path alone. He reached for his phone and called his closest friend, Alex, someone who had known him for years and had been a constant presence in his life. Alex wasn't a religious person, but they had shared many deep conversations over the years about life, love, and purpose. Hey, Keanu, everything okay? Alex's voice crackled through the line. Keanu hesitated. I don't know, man. There's this question. A little girl asked me something at an event. She asked me what God was, and I don't have an answer. And it's been bothering me. I can't stop thinking about it. Alex was quiet for a moment, as if processing Keanu's words. You've never been one to shy away from deep questions, Keanu. Why is this one different? Keanu sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't know. I've always just thought of myself as someone who goes through life, does my thing, helps where I can. But this question, it's like it's making me question everything. I mean, what am I really doing here? What's the point of all this if there's no higher meaning? I can't just keep ignoring it, but I don't know where to even begin looking for answers. Alex's tone softened. Look, man, it's okay to not have all the answers. Maybe there's no simple answer to something like that. Maybe the question itself is more important than any of the answers you'll find. Keanu thought about that for a moment. You're probably right, but I can't shake the feeling that it's something I need to figure out. I feel like I'm at a crossroads, and I don't know which path to take. There was a long pause before Alex spoke again. Maybe it's not about finding the answer right away. Maybe it's about being open to the journey. Sometimes, the process of searching for something bigger than ourselves is more important than actually finding that thing. You know? It's like a puzzle. You don't always solve it right away, but every piece that fits is a step closer. Keanu's thoughts swirled as he processed what Alex had said. Maybe this wasn't something he could resolve in one sitting, one conversation, or one moment. Maybe the search itself was part of the answer. Thanks, Alex. I needed to hear that, Keanu said, feeling a sense of relief. For the first time in a while, the pressure didn't feel so overwhelming. Perhaps he didn't have to rush to answer the question. Perhaps he needed to let the question breathe and evolve. Still, Keanu couldn't shake the nagging feeling that the little girl's question was a sign. It wasn't just some random inquiry. It was something deeper, something that called to him. As he sat there, staring at the city below, he knew that his journey to understand God, and in turn, himself, was only just beginning. But the road ahead would not be easy. It would be filled with moments of doubt, moments of clarity, and moments of deep personal reflection. And for the first time in a long time, Keanu was ready to face it all. But what he didn't know was that the deeper he went into this search, the more he would be confronted with things that would challenge not just his beliefs, but his very understanding of the world around him. In the days and weeks following his conversation with Alex, Keanu found himself increasingly immersed in his own thoughts. He had never been the type of person to look for answers in the usual places. He wasn't one to attend church regularly, nor did he ever feel the need to follow the crowds in search of some grand truth. Instead, he had always relied on the quiet spaces within himself. But now, something inside him was urging him to go deeper. The question was no longer just theoretical. It was a challenge, one that seemed to haunt him in the quiet moments of his day. Keanu had always been drawn to solitude. It was in those moments, when the world around him slowed down, that he felt most in tune with himself. But now, he found himself walking through the streets of Los Angeles, trying to figure out the meaning behind it all. Was there something more to this life than the things he had experienced? His career, his personal struggles, his public image? He found himself reflecting more on his past, the ups and downs, the highs and lows, the fleeting moments of happiness that came and went like waves on the shore. Despite all his success, he couldn't escape the feeling that something was missing. He had it all: wealth, fame, respect. But none of that seemed to answer the question he'd been grappling with for so long. What is God? The more he thought about it, the more Keanu realized that the question wasn't just an intellectual one. It was deeply personal. He had faced so much loss in his life. His sister, his ex-girlfriend, friends, and it had shaken him to his core. If there was a God, if there was something bigger than all of this, why would those things happen? Why did people have to suffer? Why was the world so chaotic and uncertain? Keanu decided that he couldn't find the answers by sitting in isolation. He had to go out into the world and see for himself. He reached out to several spiritual leaders, philosophers, and people whose wisdom he admired, hoping that someone, anyone, could offer him some direction. One of the first people he reached out to was Father Michael, a priest who had once helped him through a particularly difficult time in his life. Keanu hadn't seen him in years, but he remembered Father Michael's calming presence, and the way he spoke about life and faith with such ease. Maybe Father Michael could help him understand this question better. Keanu met Father Michael at a small cafe in downtown LA. The moment they sat down, Keanu could feel the weight of the question hanging between them. He didn't waste any time. "I need your help," Keanu began, his voice quieter than usual. "A little girl asked me a question the other day. She asked me what God was, and I don't have an answer. I'm struggling to understand it myself. I don't know where to start." Father Michael listened carefully, his kind eyes never leaving Keanu's face. When he spoke, his voice was steady, yet warm. "Keanu, the question you're asking is as old as time. It's one that has echoed through the hearts and minds of many, across different cultures and religions. And the thing is, no one can give you a simple answer. God, whatever you choose to call that force, is something we each experience in our own way." Keanu nodded, his gaze fixed on the table. "But I'm not just asking for an intellectual answer," he said. "I want to understand the pain, the suffering, the moments of joy, how all of it fits together. How can there be God in all of this?" Father Michael took a deep breath. "Sometimes, it's in the suffering that we find the most profound connection to the divine. In our moments of weakness, of loss, and of searching, we are forced to open ourselves in ways we never thought possible. And that's when we begin to see that we're not alone. We may not always have clear answers, but there's a comfort in knowing that we are part of something much bigger than ourselves." Keanu was silent for a moment, taking in Father Michael's words. He wasn't sure if he fully understood what was being said, but something about it resonated with him. Perhaps it wasn't about finding all the answers. Maybe the journey itself, the search for meaning, was a part of the divine experience. The conversation with Father Michael didn't provide Keanu with the concrete answers he was looking for, but it planted a seed of understanding. God, he began to realize, wasn't something that could be easily defined or contained. The divine existed in the spaces between the questions, in the way people interacted with one another, in the moments of vulnerability and connection. After that meeting, Keanu felt a subtle shift within himself. The questions still lingered, but they didn't feel as heavy. It was as if he had been given permission to not have all the answers, to accept the uncertainty of life. The search for God wasn't a path that could be mapped out, but rather a journey that unfolded with time. But even as Keanu began to feel a sense of peace, another challenge arose, one that would push him even further along this journey. As Keanu spent more time reflecting, he was confronted by the overwhelming sense of pain that still lingered from his past. The losses, the failures, the heartbreak. It was all still there, tucked away in the corners of his heart. These emotions didn't disappear with time, and they couldn't be ignored. They had shaped him, molded him into who he was. But now, they were coming to the forefront. Keanu realized that in order to move forward, he would have to confront these past wounds head-on. He couldn't keep running from them. He needed to accept them, embrace them, and find a way to integrate them into his journey. It wasn't easy. The pain was raw, and the memories flooded back in a rush. But Keanu knew that if he was ever going to find peace, he had to let go of the past and allow himself to heal. The journey ahead wasn't just about answering the question of God. It was about finding peace within himself. And so, Keanu embarked on a new kind of journey, one that would take him deep into his own heart, into the painful places he had long avoided. It would be a journey of healing, of reconciling the past with the present, and of finding the courage to move forward. But the deeper Keanu ventured into this exploration, the more he began to understand that it wasn't just about healing himself. It was about healing the world around him, too. Because in the end, the question of God wasn't just about finding answers for himself. It was about learning how to love, to forgive, and to connect with others on a deeper level. And that, Keanu was beginning to understand, was the true essence of the divine. Keanu had spent weeks delving into the complexities of his feelings, meeting with various mentors, reading, reflecting, and engaging in deep, personal conversations. But still, the answer to the little girl's question eluded him. He had come to accept that he might never find a single, clear-cut answer, but that didn't mean his journey wasn't important. In fact, it was the process itself that seemed to hold the most significance. Yet, deep inside, Keanu still felt as though there was something he was missing, something crucial that would help him see the bigger picture. It wasn't until a quiet, late-night drive that Keanu would experience the breakthrough he so desperately sought. It was one of those rare evenings when the streets of Los Angeles were practically empty. The lights from the city danced against the windshield of his car, casting a soft, ethereal glow that seemed to encourage introspection. Keanu found himself on a familiar route, driving along the coast. The waves crashed rhythmically against the shore, a constant reminder of nature's quiet power. As he drove, he thought back to everything he had learned so far. The conversations with Father Michael, his discussions with Alex, and the hours spent reflecting alone in his home. None of them had provided him with the answers he expected, but they had pushed him to think more deeply, to consider that the answers weren't necessarily going to come in the way he had hoped. And then, as though the universe was nudging him in the right direction, he found himself at the same beach he had visited so many times before. The place had always been a sanctuary for him, a place of calm and reflection, but tonight, it felt different. It felt like the right place to confront everything that had been weighing on him. Keanu parked his car and stepped out, the cool night air wrapping around him like a comforting embrace. The moonlight reflected off the waves, and the sound of the ocean was both peaceful and overwhelming. It was as though the entire universe was holding its breath, waiting for him to find the clarity he so desperately sought. He walked along the beach, the sand cold beneath his feet, until he reached the spot where he had stood many years ago when he had first moved to Los Angeles. The vastness of the ocean always made him feel small, but tonight, instead of feeling insignificant, he felt a sense of belonging. The ocean, in all its immensity, felt like it was part of him, as if its rhythm and power were a reflection of his own internal struggles. As Keanu stood there, gazing at the vastness before him, the weight of the question, "What is God?" seemed to shift. It wasn't a question of intellect or logic, it was a question of presence. God, he realized, wasn't something that could be contained in a definition or neatly tied to a specific belief system. God was in the ocean, in the stars above, in the waves crashing against the shore. God was in every breath he took, in every connection he made with others, and in the moments of pain and healing. In that instant, Keanu understood. He had spent so much time trying to make sense of the abstract question, seeking an intellectual answer, but the answer wasn't found in his head. It was found in his heart. God was everywhere. In the beauty of nature, in the love shared between people, and in the simple, quiet moments of life. Tears welled up in Keanu's eyes as the weight of this realization settled in. For the first time, he felt a profound sense of peace, a peace that had eluded him for so long. The question of God wasn't something that could be answered with certainty or finality. It was a mystery, and it was okay not to have all the answers. In fact, the mystery itself was sacred. As he stood there, overcome with emotion, Keanu realized that it wasn't about understanding everything all at once. It was about accepting the journey, embracing the unknown, and allowing himself to be open to the love and beauty that existed in every moment. His mind drifted back to the little girl, the one whose innocent question had sparked this entire journey. He wished he could go back in time and answer her, to tell her that the question wasn't just one of curiosity, it was one of transformation. Her question had set him on a path that had forever changed him. In a way, he thought, perhaps the little girl had known something all along, something that he had been too caught up in his own life to see. Maybe God wasn't something to be defined, but something to be experienced. As Keanu sat on the sand, the tears still flowing, he understood that this moment, this very realization, was the answer he had been seeking. God wasn't about finding a definitive solution. It was about feeling the presence of something larger than himself, something that connected everything in the universe. The pain, the joy, the beauty. It all had meaning because it was part of this greater force that transcended human understanding. The waves continued to crash against the shore, the stars shimmered in the sky, and Keanu felt more connected to the world around him than ever before. He didn't need to have all the answers. What mattered was that he was willing to ask the questions, to search, and to remain open to whatever came his way. It was a powerful realization, one that would stay with him for the rest of his life. And as he stood there, the night air filling his lungs. Keanu knew that he had found the peace he had been searching for. For the first time, he felt at home in his own soul, at peace with the question, and ready to continue his journey. Not with all the answers, but with the understanding that the journey itself was what mattered most. The days that followed Keanu's moment of revelation felt like a gentle unfolding of a new chapter in his life. He had spent years seeking external validation and understanding, relying on logic and reason to explain everything, but now, he had discovered a new approach, one rooted in acceptance, connection, and a profound peace with the unknown. As he woke up the next morning, he felt an undeniable sense of calm, something he hadn't felt in a long time. The weight that had pressed down on him for so many years seemed to have lifted, if only for a moment. The question of God, once a source of inner turmoil, had transformed into something entirely different. It was no longer a riddle to be solved, but a journey to be experienced. Keanu spent more time with the people who mattered most in his life, his friends, his family, and even the fans who had supported him through the years. He felt a deeper connection to them than ever before. He had always appreciated the love he received from those around him, but now he saw it in a new light. Their presence wasn't just a comfort, it was a reflection of the divine he had been searching for all along. One afternoon, as he sat in his quiet home, Keanu received a message that would solidify his newfound peace. It was from Alex, the young girl who had unknowingly set this journey in motion. She had sent him a drawing, a simple picture of a sun shining brightly in the sky, with the words, "God is love." The innocence and clarity of her message hit Keanu in the chest like a tidal wave. She didn't need an intellectual answer, didn't need complicated explanations. In her world, the answer was simple, pure, and undeniable. God wasn't something that could be understood with facts and logic. God was love. In that moment, Keanu felt a rush of emotion. It was as though Alex had sent him the key to unlock the very thing he had been searching for all along. As he sat with the drawing, Keanu thought about everything he had been through. The heartache, the questions, the doubts, and how they had all led him here. To a place where he could finally accept that he didn't need to know everything to feel whole. Life, with all its uncertainties, was beautiful precisely because of its mysteries. The journey itself, the quest for understanding, for love, for connection, was where the divine resided. Keanu thought back to his conversation with Father Michael, who had said that sometimes, in the suffering and in the quiet moments of searching, we find our connection to the divine. Keanu now understood this fully. He had suffered, yes, but through that suffering, he had found himself. Through his quest for answers, he had uncovered a truth that went beyond words. He took a deep breath and let the feeling wash over him. God wasn't confined to one place or one religion. God was in the love shared between people, in the quiet moments of self-reflection, and in the beauty of nature. God was everywhere, and he was everything. Keanu was no longer in search of something outside of himself. The peace he had longed for had always been within him, just waiting for him to realize it. He didn't need to have all the answers to live a meaningful life. In fact, sometimes it was better to accept the uncertainty, to trust that everything had a purpose, even if that purpose wasn't always clear. He knew now that the real meaning of life wasn't about solving all the mysteries of existence. It was about love, kindness, connection, and living authentically. Every action, every interaction, every choice had the potential to carry a piece of that divine love. That was the answer. In the weeks that followed, Keanu found himself living with more intention. He took time to appreciate the little things, the warmth of the sun on his face, the laughter of his friends, the moments of stillness that allowed him to reflect on his journey. He started to spend more time in nature, allowing himself to connect with the world around him in a way he never had before. The act of simply being present became one of his greatest joys. Keanu also reconnected with his fans, reaching out to those who had supported him over the years. His interactions with them were more meaningful now. He didn't just see them as admirers or people who followed his career. He saw them as fellow human beings, each on their own journey, searching for love, understanding, and connection. He began to share more openly about his own struggles and realizations, offering a message of hope to those who might be feeling lost or alone. His story wasn't one of fame or success. It was one of vulnerability, healing, and growth, and it resonated deeply with people. Through it all, Keanu continued to reflect on the powerful lesson he had learned from that innocent question. What is God? The answer was simple, yet profound. God was love. God was in every person, every moment, and every connection. And it was this love, this divine force, that made life worth living. Keanu's journey was far from over. He knew that there would still be moments of doubt, moments of pain, and moments of searching. But now, he understood that those moments were just as important as the moments of clarity. They were part of the whole experience, the ebb and flow of life, the process of becoming who we are meant to be. And as Keanu sat in the stillness of his home, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here, he realized that the answer wasn't something to be found at the end of the road. It was something that was always there, waiting to be discovered in each and every moment. With a deep sense of gratitude, Keanu smiled to himself. He had found the peace he had been searching for, not through answers, but through acceptance. And in that peace, he had found God. The months that followed brought even more clarity to Keanu. The overwhelming sense of peace he had discovered began to permeate every aspect of his life. He was no longer consumed by the questions that had once haunted him. Instead, he found joy in the everyday moments, the small interactions with people, and the love that seemed to surround him in ways he had never fully appreciated before. It was as if the universe itself had opened up to him, revealing new layers of beauty and meaning in every breath he took. One morning, Keanu sat in his kitchen, sipping coffee and staring out the window at the sunrise. The golden light bathed the city, casting long shadows and illuminating everything it touched. It was a scene he had witnessed countless times before, but today it felt different. Today, the world felt more alive, more connected, and more precious than ever. It was during this quiet moment of reflection that he received a call from Father Michael. The priest had become a dear friend during Keanu's spiritual journey, and their conversations had often delved into the depths of faith, doubt, and life's mysteries. Keanu had come to rely on Father Michael's wisdom, but even more, he had come to appreciate his genuine kindness and unwavering belief in the goodness of the human spirit. Keanu, I've been thinking a lot about your journey, Father Michael said warmly. You've made such incredible progress, and it's clear that you've found something deep inside yourself. But I think it's time for you to start sharing your story with others. Keanu was quiet for a moment, considering the priest's words. It was true that he had kept most of his journey to himself, sharing it only with those closest to him. But the thought of opening up to a larger audience, of telling his story to the world, was daunting. I'm not sure if I'm ready for that, Keanu replied hesitantly. My journey has been so personal. I'm not sure how to express it in a way that will make sense to others. Father Michael chuckled softly. Keanu, your story is not just for you. You've been given something profound, a gift of understanding and peace that many people long for. It's not about having all the answers. It's about sharing the journey. You don't have to be perfect, and you don't have to have it all figured out. You simply have to be honest. There is great power in honesty. Keanu took a deep breath, the weight of Father Michael's words sinking in. Perhaps it was time. Perhaps sharing his story was not only a way to connect with others, but also a way to continue his own healing. Later that week, Keanu made the decision. He would open up in a way he never had before. He would share his journey with the world, not as a polished, perfect story, but as a real, raw account of the doubts, the struggles, and ultimately, the peace he had found. It wasn't about preaching or teaching. It was about being vulnerable, about showing others that it was okay to question, to search, and to not have all the answers. He started by speaking with his team, telling them his plan. The response was overwhelmingly supportive. Keanu knew that sharing his personal story, especially one that was so deeply tied to his search for God and meaning, would require a leap of faith. But he was no longer afraid. The peace he had found was enough to carry him through any uncertainty. Over the next few weeks, Keanu worked with a small team of writers, editors, and close friends to create a project, a book, a video series, something that could capture his journey in a way that was accessible and meaningful to others. He wanted to speak from the heart, sharing the raw moments, the vulnerable thoughts, and the lessons he had learned along the way. The process wasn't always easy. There were moments when Keanu felt exposed, as though his very soul was being laid bare for the world to see. But there were also moments of immense joy, when he realized that by sharing his story, he was not only helping others, but he was helping himself too. He was giving voice to his experiences, allowing himself to heal in ways he never imagined possible. As the project took shape, Keanu found himself reconnecting with old friends and mentors, people who had supported him throughout his career and personal life. Each conversation, each exchange, felt like a reminder that he was not alone in this journey. He was surrounded by love, by people who had their own stories to tell, stories of struggle, of faith, of resilience. The more he opened up, the more he realized that everyone was on their own search for meaning. Some were further along in their journey, others were just beginning. But at the heart of it all, there was one universal truth that connected them all: the search for love, connection, and understanding. And as Keanu prepared to share his story with the world, he realized that this was just the beginning. His journey had led him to a place of peace and acceptance, but there was still much to explore, much to learn. He didn't have all the answers, and perhaps he never would. But he was okay with that. Because in the end, the most important thing wasn't finding the right answer. It was being willing to ask the question, to search for meaning, and to open up to the beauty of life, even in its most uncertain moments. Keanu smiled to himself as he sat back in his chair, reflecting on everything he had experienced. The world felt a little brighter now, a little more connected. And for the first time in his life, he was ready to share that light with others. When Keanu finally shared his journey, it was in a way that felt authentic to him. An intimate interview, a documentary-style video, and a heartfelt book that wove together the experiences and realizations he had over the past year. He didn't want it to be a preachy account of his spiritual growth or a polished story of triumph. Instead, he wanted it to be a conversation. His purpose was simple: to open hearts, to create space for others to reflect, to inspire those who might be walking their own path of searching and seeking. The response was overwhelming. People from all walks of life reached out to express their gratitude, their own stories, and their personal reflections. The comments, letters, and messages flooded in from across the globe. Some people telling him that his vulnerability had helped them understand their own struggles, while others shared how his openness about faith and doubt had helped them feel less alone in their own questions about God. The most powerful moment came when a single message came through. A message from a woman named Sarah, a mother who had recently lost her child. She wrote about how, after watching Keanu's story, she felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for months. Her grief was still raw, but she now understood that it was okay to feel lost, to have doubts, and yet still find beauty and love in life. Keanu sat with the letter for a long time. It was moments like these that made everything worth it. It wasn't about being a hero or a perfect figure. It was about being honest and allowing others to see themselves in your story. It was about creating a space where people could feel vulnerable, and in that vulnerability, find healing. He also noticed the profound effect his story had on the people closest to him. Friends who had always known him as the quiet, private man began to open up in ways they hadn't before. They shared their own fears, their own questions, their own beliefs. It was as though Keanu's courage had unlocked a deeper, more honest connection between them all. But beyond the personal stories, the world at large seemed to respond to something greater, something universal in Keanu's message. People from different cultures, religions, and backgrounds found resonance in his words. Whether they believed in a higher power or not, his message of love, connection, and acceptance transcended boundaries. It wasn't about religious dogma or rigid belief systems. It was about human connection and the shared experience of being alive. Keanu was invited to speak at events, some spiritual, some focused on mental health, others geared toward personal growth and development. He never expected to become a public figure in this way, but he embraced the opportunity. Every speech, every conversation, felt like another step in his journey. Not only his own, but also the journey of those who resonated with his message. One evening, after speaking at an event on resilience and overcoming adversity, Keanu sat in his dressing room, reflecting on everything he had been through. He felt like a different person, a person more aligned with his true self, a person who had found peace not through external accomplishments but through internal acceptance. As he sat there, the door opened, and in walked Father Michael. The priest smiled warmly at him, having traveled from his own parish to attend the event. "You were amazing tonight," Father Michael said, taking a seat next to Keanu. "I could feel the power of your words, and I know that you're touching lives in ways you can't even imagine." Keanu smiled back, a mix of gratitude and humility in his eyes. "It feels good to share my story, but it's not just about me anymore. It's about all of us. It's about this journey we're all on together." Father Michael nodded, his eyes filled with knowing. "You've learned that the most important thing is not to have all the answers, but to live the questions with love and authenticity. And in doing so, you've become a beacon for others. You've shown them that they're not alone." Keanu thought about that for a moment. He had often feared being alone in his search for meaning. But now, as he looked around, he realized that no one was truly alone. Every person was on their own journey, yes, but they were all part of the same story. The same human story of love, doubt, pain, and triumph. And through their shared experiences, they could find connection and healing. "I've been blessed, Father," Keanu said softly, "not with answers, but with a deep sense of peace. And I'm grateful for that every day." Father Michael placed a hand on Keanu's shoulder. "You've shared your gift with the world, my friend. And in doing so, you've become part of the answer. The answer is love. It always has been." As Keanu left the event that night, surrounded by the familiar faces of his friends and supporters, he couldn't help but feel that his journey had come full circle. The search for God, for meaning, for peace, had led him not to an end, but to a beginning. He had found the answers he had sought, not through religion or doctrine, but through love. He had learned that it was okay to question, to search, and to doubt. He had learned that it was okay to not have all the answers. And most importantly, he had learned that love, in all its forms, was the key to it all. As the lights of the city sparkled below, Keanu smiled to himself. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, he felt that he was walking it with a deeper sense of understanding and peace. And that, he realized, was enough. As the days passed, Keanu couldn't shake the overwhelming feeling that had settled over him. It was a mix of fulfillment and peace, knowing that his journey, one that had been deeply personal, filled with uncertainty, and punctuated by moments of profound insight, had come to a place of meaning and connection with the world. Yet, despite everything he had learned, he still felt that there was much more to discover. Life, after all, was an ongoing exploration, and the lessons it had to offer would continue to unfold. The impact of his openness about his faith, his doubts, and the questions that had shaped his life continued to ripple out into the world. His book became a bestseller, and his documentary sparked conversations in communities from all corners of the globe. He received invitations to speak at conferences, to share his message of love, hope, and resilience. People who were struggling with their own hardships found solace in his words, in his willingness to be vulnerable and to simply ask, "What is this all about?" Keanu's story was not one of perfection or miraculous answers. It was about accepting the unknown and finding peace in the process of seeking. That was the gift he had shared with others, the gift of being open to life's mysteries without needing to control them. And through that openness, he found a deep, resonant connection to others. One afternoon, after a particularly emotional speaking engagement, Keanu sat quietly on a bench overlooking a serene lake in the park, reflecting on everything that had transpired over the past year. The sky was clear, the air crisp, and the sounds of the city seemed distant in this peaceful moment. A young girl, no older than 10, walked by with her mother. She was smiling, enjoying the day, completely unaware that she was walking past one of the most famous actors in the world. But as she passed Keanu, she stopped and looked up at him, her eyes full of curiosity. She stood there for a moment, watching him with the same innocent wonder that children often have when they see someone they don't quite recognize but feel drawn to. Keanu smiled at her and gave a small wave. "Hey there," he said gently, not wanting to startle her. The girl hesitated for a moment, then approached him shyly. Are you Keanu Reeves?" she asked, her voice small but clear. Keanu chuckled softly, nodding. "Yeah, I am." How are you doing? I'm good, she exclaimed, smiling brightly. I just wanted to say that I really like your movies. Keanu's heart warmed at the simplicity and honesty of her words. Thank you. That means a lot to me. The girl looked at him, then tilted her head slightly. You know, I have a question for you, she said, her voice filled with an innocence that caught Keanu off guard. Sure, Keanu said, intrigued. What's your question? The girl looked up at the sky, thinking for a moment, then turned back to him. I've been wondering, do you think God is real? And if he is, why does bad stuff happen? Like, why do people hurt each other, or why do bad things happen to good people? Keanu felt a lump form in his throat. It was a question that had crossed his mind many times, a question he had struggled with himself, but hearing it come from this young girl, so unguarded and pure, struck him in a way he hadn't expected. She had asked the very question that had driven so much of his journey, the question that so many people wrestled with in their hearts. Keanu took a deep breath and looked at the girl, who was waiting patiently for an answer. The gentle breeze ruffled her hair as she stood there, her expression one of sincere curiosity, and Keanu realized that this moment was another gift, another opportunity to share what he had learned. You know, he said slowly, choosing his words carefully, I don't have all the answers to those big questions, but here's what I've come to believe. Bad things do happen, and sometimes life can be really hard. But I think that love, kindness, and compassion are the things that help us get through those hard times. I believe that God, or whatever you want to call it, is love. And love is the thing that connects all of us, even when bad things happen. It's the one thing that helps us heal and move forward. The girl nodded thoughtfully, as if taking in his words. So, love is what makes everything okay? She asked, her voice full of wonder. Keanu smiled gently. I don't think it makes everything okay all at once, but love is the thing that helps us keep going. It helps us be better people, even when life is hard. And I believe that no matter how dark things may seem, love is always there, waiting for us to find it. The girl looked down at the ground for a moment, processing what he had said, and then looked back up at him with a smile. I think that makes sense, she said softly. Thank you for telling me. Keanu watched her as she turned to join her mother, who had been patiently waiting by the lake. As the little girl skipped away, Keanu felt a deep sense of gratitude. For all the people who had come into his life during this journey, for all the answers and insights he had gained. Moments like these, moments of connection, were the ones that truly mattered. It wasn't about the fame or the recognition. It was about sharing love, understanding, and peace with others, especially in the moments when they needed it most. Keanu sat back, looking out over the lake. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow across the water. He felt a deep sense of peace settle in his heart. He had come so far, and yet, he knew there was still so much more to discover. The answers, as he had learned, were never as important as the journey itself. The journey of learning to love, to be vulnerable, to ask the tough questions, and to share the lessons learned along the way. And now, he was more certain than ever that love for others, love for the world, and love for himself, was the answer to the greatest question of all. As the world around him grew quieter with the approach of evening, Keanu closed his eyes, taking in the beauty of the moment. He had found peace, and that peace, he knew, was a legacy that would continue to live on in the hearts of everyone who had been touched by his story. The journey was far from over, but he was no longer afraid of the unknown. Because, in the end, he had discovered that love was the one thing that would always guide him forward.